16th episode in this webinar series. So I'm sure you all agree that today is a great day. Things are a heck of a lot more positive than when we started this some 16 weeks ago. And I'm sure Katie will say in a second, but never for a second did I ever think that I would be helping to present a webinar series. But yeah, the sun is shining. We're staring down the barrel of Friday, which is looking set to be one of the hottest days of 2020 and maybe since records began. But today is also a very sad day because it marks the last episode in this series of webinars. Yeah, I think it's probably the same for Katie as well. Wednesdays have been a highlight of my weeks, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. But yeah, I'm sure that now is time to pivot again and look at other things. But rest assured, once Katie's had a break from writing all this wonderful material over the last 4 months, we will be back. So today's webinar is on leadership tensions. And I'm sure everyone that is dialed in today that is in a leadership role has felt some kind of tension throughout this pandemic period or almost on a daily basis. So Katie's going to help us deep dive into 4 really common tension areas that exist for us leaders, namely self-leadership and team leadership, solving problems and seeing opportunity, performance expectations and current reality, and team culture pre and post COVID. So Katie will deep dive into all of these and explore the balance rather between each element of these 4 areas. So I've introduced Katie, I think, well over 20 times during this sort of webinar series now, but for those of you that are maybe dialing in for the first time, Katie, as you know, is one of our own. Katie's been with us for nearly 20 years now. She's our leadership and development director, having spent the best part of 15 years before her current role in very much an operational role like myself. So interesting fact for Katie, her sort of passion for people and for leadership and psychology can be traced back to her pre-Robert Half days, where she actually studied a degree in psychology at Bath University and was even considering becoming a clinical psychologist. So nothing gives Katie more passion than people, but I suppose even more so her 3 beautiful children that she has in her life. So without further ado, we're in for a treat today. So over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. It's lovely to see so many familiar names coming through and some new names as well. But what we'd like to do today we're going to open at the end to a Q&A, but what would be really useful, you've all got the question function at the bottom of your screen. Rather than necessarily waiting to the end, if you want to post a question in there, Matt Robinson, who's hosting the webinar with me today, will be able to take note of those and filter those to Steve and myself at the end. So today's webinar is really going to hopefully give you an opportunity to explore what the next normal might look like for you in terms of your leadership. And as we know, in the last 18 weeks, leadership, our economy, everything has evolved in unprecedented rate, and I think we're all facing, still greater levels of disruption than we ever have before. And traditional leadership style of command and control, building consistency and executing on those decisions has really been questioned over the last 18 weeks. We now need to recognize that those skills are important, but the reality is we need much more future-orientated, change-ready leadership skills to really work with the market trends and demands. So what today's webinar will use is our own experiences at Robert Half, research from Korn Ferry and McKinsey, and as Steve said, we're going to explore the 4 most common tensions that are arising from kind of morphing from that traditional to emerging leadership that we're seeing. Now, they're not the only tensions, but in the spirit of kind of a 40-minute webinar, we're just picking the 4 most common. And I guess those tensions that we're seeing, they create stress, they create problems for leaders because they are uncertain as to what competencies, skills, behaviours that we should use in a particular context. And hopefully by exploring those four main tensions today, we will hopefully aid understanding, but really point out the dangers in ignoring them and also suggest ways to balance them. You know, this isn't an either or this or that, it's absolutely an and. But I guess one disclaimer, you know, both myself, Steve and Matt would acknowledge personally, is that I think practically every leader that I've spoken to over the last 18 weeks, regardless of industry, regardless of size of company, everyone has a much more tougher, more complex job than ever before. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, we recognize it, and we appreciate it, because, you know, everything, the whole landscape for everyone has changed. So as we move through the webinar, I guess before we start and specifically talk about those four key tensions, I just kind of want to highlight some good news really, and really, I guess, kind of acknowledge the journey we've come on and how well everyone's done. By the fact that you're on this call today means that it's like a lifeboat. That's kind of how I've described it. It's almost like we've gone through the lifeboat exercise, and the great news is we've all made it to the lifeboat. Now, it might be by the skin of our teeth, but nevertheless, we've made it. And I think, you know, we should congratulate ourselves for that. I think everyone on this call, in your teams, in your organizations, has had to show so much grit, so much resilience, so much agility in the last 18 weeks that has been so pivotal in everyone's personal and team successes. So like I said, whether you're listening to that thinking, crikey, you know, I'm only here by the skin of my teeth, you should still celebrate that and look around and maybe reflect on the last 18 weeks to see what sort of wins, whether they're big or small, that we've had individually, in our teams and in our overall organizations. And I think now we're not so much in crisis mode. I mean, we're certainly still in that change curve, but because we're less in that crisis mode now, I think we can now sit back and think more clearly about the future. And now is the time, I think we've got time to be more intentional and deliberate with our leadership style. So, as Steve said, we're going to explore the four main leadership tensions. And those leadership tensions really are all about the importance of balancing them. And we all know balance is super important, whether that's in our personal lives or our professional lives. But learning to understand this, learning to manage these dynamics, and understanding that it's an and, it's not a this or a that, is going to really help you understand how you need to show up as a leader. You know, what is it that serves you, what helps or hurts you, and it will just make your leadership experience be much more effective. So the four main leadership tensions that we're going to explore today, the first one is self-leadership and team leadership. And you know what, at times it can take as much focus to focus on yourself as it can the team. That team versus I is a constant dynamic that we've got to handle. The next one is solving problems and seeing opportunity. That ability to balance between being focused on solving the problem, being reactive, but also being able to see opportunities, being proactive. So that's that ability to call the play, knowing what the right thing is to do. The third one, which I think is really topical right now as we're coming towards the end of the first phase of furlough, is many companies are re-onboarding employees, that performance expectation versus current reality, that creating a culture of accountability in a time where, let's be honest, success is a moving target. What might feel like, you know, be deemed as a success today might change in 2 weeks' time. And I think that one at the moment is tough, really tough. And then the last one is team culture, and how you create that with that virtual environment. You know, the team culture before COVID, you know, was everyone all together, all connected, all collectively, you know, physically. And, you know, now we've got the virtual environment, and, you know, many would say that's here to stay, whether that's hybrid or not. That makes it a lot harder for people. And culture is the cornerstone of any good company, we all know that, and I think culture's probably slipped down the list for many companies in the last 18 weeks, and I think it's very much more coming to the forefront of everyone's agendas again. And I think, you know, culture doesn't cease to exist in tough times. You know, establishing that need for collaboration, camaraderie, that success that we've seen in a virtual environment. There have been so many wins. I just think it's super important that we continue to build upon that healthy culture. So we all know that, you know, building upon these tensions and creating balance is super important. The reality is it's so much harder to do. And, you know, an example of that would be, you know, if you're leaning into your own personal performance at the moment, you know, and you're struggling, if you have challenges, it's really hard when your team needs you as well and they're struggling and they need coaching and mentoring. So I think, you know, as leaders, we're all trying to keep that sense of optimism, be in the business of hope, if you like. But I think it's important to acknowledge the reality in our conversations, to have intellectually honest conversations with our teams. So I guess the first thing we'd love to do now is we're going to bring up a poll, and we would love for everyone just to answer which one of the on-screen tensions, so that each one of them are the 4 that we've discussed, would you say you feel most out of balance with? And like I said, you're probably experiencing all of them right now in some shape or form, but which one do you feel most out of balance with right now? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to click which one you feel is most relevant to you. And it will just be really interesting to see where everyone is at. So Matt will give it a moment and then he'll share the results with us just to see everyone on the call which one is the most out of balance at the moment. And hopefully that will give everyone an opportunity as well to see where perhaps they can create a bit more balance.
Okay, Katie, so most people have voted. I'm just going to leave it open for another couple of seconds.
Right.
Kind of 3/4 of the people have voted. So get your voting now, because I'm about to end the poll. Hang on a second, just ending, and I'll share the results with you, Katie.
Brilliant.
They're just coming through now. So you should be able to see those on screen, Katie.
So it's pretty even keel in some respects, but the team culture has come out as the winner, which is interesting. Performance expectations, the others are split pretty much across the board. So what is great, we've got balance in our tensions at least, which is what that poll would show me. But I think, you know, dependent, as I said, there is no wrong or right, but dependent on which one you feel you're most out of balance with, we're going to talk through each one of them now and hopefully give you some tips or some strategies around how you can seek and understand when you're out of balance, but more importantly, what you can do to create that balance moving forward. So the first one we're going to talk about is self-leadership and team leadership. And I think now more than ever, our ability to lead ourselves and remain self-aware is absolutely critical. And I think every team, every individual's reality shifted in the last 18 weeks. You know, it could be your role, it could be who you're reporting to, even the way that you're doing business has probably changed. And I think everyone on the call would agree that with that, I think everyone's level of safety, belonging, and mattering has gone from anything to being challenged to shattered. So I think, you know, as leaders, we have a choice. We have a choice in terms of how we show up, how we act. You know, we set the tone. And, you know, as I said earlier, that's really hard when you're caught in sometimes the down spiral of your own challenges and struggles. But I think it's really important that we're aware and intentional in these critical areas. So if we think about how we manage ourselves, preferences are really powerful. And I think, you know, a really good example of this is, as a leader, what's your preference? Everyone back in the office, everyone working from home, or hybrid? And it doesn't matter what your preference is. It's just really important that you are aware that your ability to balance the needs of working from home and being back in the office, that you are treating everyone fairly, that everyone has equity as it relates to support and communication and inclusion and development. You know, no one should be at a disadvantage. Now that's hard. It was hard when we were all together. Now we've got 2 different environments to do that in. So I think that's really important that you're aware of your own preferences and you don't let that hinder your leadership style or your balance. Mindset and attitude, we all know that mindset is kind of the foundation of everyone's behaviors. It sets the tone, you know, whether you're being positive, negative, cynical, critical, you know, your mindset impacts your behavior, your attitudes, your actions, as it will your team. And similarly with your attitude, you know, if you can see maybe there's an attitude within your team members that you're not happy with, you know, a really good suggestion I would have is perhaps record a call that you do. You know, pretty much a lot of our calls now are done on Teams or, I don't know, Google Hangouts or Zoom, whatever it might be. Listen to yourself, because it'll be really interesting. You will be able to hear maybe your own tone, and it will hopefully give you some insight in terms of how you're impacting others. Biases, very similar to preferences. It's the foundation, I guess, our own beliefs and values, and just being mindful to not put disproportionate weight over one over the other. And then resilience and agility. They're probably two of the leadership skills that we've seen in the last 18 weeks kind of emerge as kind of top desirable leadership qualities. And that's super important, because I think, you know, what we've seen definitely in our own organization, but certainly those of customers that we serve, leaders that have shown resilience and grit have definitely helped bring their companies on the brink of surviving to thriving. So I think when you think about your team, it's your role to set the pace. You know, it all starts with you. Now, that's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of responsibility, but if not you, then who? Calling the play, you know, with confidence, that ability to understand that you're going to get it really right and sometimes you're going to get it really wrong. I guess the power is knowing when to adjust, when to change the play. That creating a culture of performance and accountability. I think everyone that we're helping at the moment is definitely got more diligent again around performance, and how performance now looks is very different from the past. What does success now look like for everyone? And are you being clear about expectations? And then contributing to the team, that's culture. As I said earlier, a culture doesn't cease to exist when things get tough. What does your team need from you to ensure its culture still moves forward, it's healthy, it's evolving, and people want to stay working for you? It's been really interesting with a lot of the candidates that are still interviewing for roles at the moment. You know, asking what team culture like is still probably a #1 priority for them. So that culture piece is super important that we get back, you know, high on the agenda. So we're going to explore now a little bit more about setting the pace. And, you know, as a leader, you are the pace setter, as I said. And, you know, I guess a good question to ask yourselves is, you know, can you and your team still run a 5-minute mile? Now, I appreciate that's, you know, obviously a metaphor, because I certainly couldn't run a 5-minute mile. But pace setting is about providing clarity. It's about providing direction. You know, are you doing that for your team? And, you know, we acknowledged earlier that a lot of leaders have the weight of the world on their shoulders. And, you know, we need to acknowledge that and help leaders that, you know, are in our world of responsibility. But how do we as leaders still continue to define goals, adjust priorities, just like we did prior to the pandemic? You know, knowing when to push or pull, what indicators could we look at to use to know what to do? You know, we all have, you know, a plethora of data. You know, what does that data tell us? You know, it won't tell us what to do, but it will probably help you and aid you make decisions. You know, building relationships and providing value to our customers is still an absolute priority, but are we being creative around how we can deal with that? You know, that kind of openness for ideas. Technology is still huge. It leads from the front, I think, in terms of how we're responding. You know, what ways are you using all the different platforms you have internally and externally to stay connected? And I guess at the end of the day, by setting the right tone, by setting the pace, you build confidence because you coach people, you create routine, which builds in discipline and allows you to lead by example, and you offer support, that personal and professional support, those frequent feedback, individual team, those pulse checks, they're the ones that refill the tank. They're the ones that keep people going. And you know, I know we have internally, but I would imagine many of you on the call would agree that we've seen a lot of mental well-being, mental wellness become really high on the agenda over the last 6 to 7 weeks, where, you know, we're dealing with levels of fatigue, levels of exhaustion that we've never seen before. And we need to make sure that we are offering that support individually as a leader and organizationally. So we're going to move on now to look a little bit more around the problems and the opportunities that we have in front of us. And the first thing we're going to do actually is get you to answer another poll. And the first question that we're going to ask you is, do you feel your organization is still operating in a problem solving mode? Now, as you can see here, you can answer yes, sometimes, or no. There is no right or wrong answer. And there is a lot of merit in problem solving. You know, being a problem solver allows you to focus on what's important. It allows you to identify key priorities. It allows you to not get distracted from goals. But also it can be quite limiting because it can make you not look left and right and above across to the horizon to see what might be coming. So if you could just click which one you feel your organization is more in the mode of, whether it's yes for lots of problem solving sometimes or no, that would be great.
Katie, still have some people answering this, so just going to give it another couple of seconds, sorry.
That's okay. But like I said, there's no wrong or right, just whichever one you feel, you know, whether you're answering it as yourself or whether you're answering it on behalf of your team, that's absolutely fine. And, you know, as I just explained, there is good in, you know, there's good in problem solving, and there's, you know, there's absolutely some limitations as well.
So I'm just going to end the poll, Katie, and share the results with you so you can see that. There you go.
So what's great is not many are feeling that you're in problem solving mode, which is awesome. That would be, you know, to me, that's a great sign that we're in the reimagination stage, that we're seeing those green shoots. So, you know, that's interesting. And sometimes, you know, I think sometimes is probably where we're all going to be at, because we need to focus on problems and get them solved, but we also need to, I guess, think holistically across. Okay, so the next question I want to ask you, and there's not a poll for this, but just maybe for you guys to reflect upon, is if you could just ask yourselves, has your organization missed any opportunities to improve processes or connect with your customers in the last, I mean, we've got 12 weeks, but the reality is it probably has been 16 weeks. So I don't know if you maybe reflect upon it. Are there any missed opportunities that maybe we could go back to and maybe think about and maybe use as part of the reimagination stage for you, your team, or your wider organization? So we're going to talk a little bit more now about opportunity. And there's a really famous American industrialist called Henry Chrysler, who basically said, problems are opportunities in work clothes. And, you know, challenges will always appear, but if we're not careful, we can get blindsided to the opportunities that lie at the other end, I guess. And I guess intentional leaders, people that really, I guess, look to the left, the right, and beyond, they really look for opportunity in adversity. And the way that they do that is they get their facts, they look at the patterns and themes that they're seeing, they do their research, whatever reporting tools that you have internally, talking to your teams, you know, listening to your people, what's working, what's not working. And I guess the way I like to think of this is almost like a puzzle, and I'm sure many of you in lockdown did puzzles as we did at home. And it's important to see, I guess, how all the pieces come together. You know, you look for signs or indicators or characteristics of how the pieces fit together. And kind of that's, I guess, what we're saying about the opportunities, you know, by really being a student of the game and really looking at the data, you know, looking for any trends, and then really thinking about how you can make not an educated guess, I guess, but how you can make a decision and move forward. And I think the key here is not to overcomplicate things. It's quite simple, really. It's just really reacting to the current situation at hand, but also being proactive about anticipating the future. So we're going to move on now to culture of performance. And as I alluded to earlier, a lot of clients, customers that we're talking to, this is probably a bit of a sticking point at the moment for some, as we're re-onboarding people back from furlough, as some of us are going through process changes, infrastructure changes, you know, all of those things. And you know, there are a number of key behaviours that will help you create a culture of performance. The first one is delivering feedback. Now, as I said earlier, that could be face-to-face or that could be via video. Timely feedback's really important because that's how people move forward, whether it's a positive conversation or a tough conversation. And it's absolutely key that you still give timely feedback. providing crystal clear expectations. Success, as we said, is a moving target. And for everyone, our metrics, our ratios, they've all changed. What made you successful pre the pandemic might not make you successful today. And it's really important that we help people by providing those crystal clear expectations, because that's how people stay engaged, motivated, they know what's expected of them. Showing intensity and fairness. And, you know, this, I think fairness we spoke about earlier, but how do you still show intensity when you've got half of the team in the office and half of them at home? That's really, really hard. And you have to work out for you as a leader and as an organization how you're still going to set the tone with that, because people need to feel the energy and they need to feel equality to be successful. Being open to doing new things in new ways. You know, we've spoken about the importance of, you know, that openness to innovation. What worked previously might not no longer work. So I think it's really important that we make the most of our technological advances, our virtual advancements, to really see how we can spin those into wider opportunities. Celebrating new successes. You know, people need to feel successful. They need to feel like there's progress, that they're moving forward. And, you know, what again is successful today will be very different to what was, and perhaps what will be in the next 3 to 6 months. You know, that culture of performance still needs to happen, even when we're in an unpredictable landscape, which, let's be honest, we're still very much in. And then finally, consistency of connectedness. This one for me is really important, and it might sound a little bit repetitive. It might sound like something you already know, but those pulse checks, individual team meetings, they are so, so important, because especially for those that are going to continue to work in remotely, that's how you create that. You rally the troops, you galvanize, you get that sense of camaraderie, and that massively will increase levels of engagement, which will obviously enhance performance. So I think being connected, I certainly would say in our own experience in Robert Half, most of the people that have come back to work, the reason they've come back is to feel part of something, to be part of the team. I don't know what that perhaps is like in your teams, but I think it's certainly something that we probably need to just be aware of. We are social animals, and we need to feel that togetherness. So the final tension we're going to explore is culture. And as I said earlier, I think culture kind of brings everything together. You come full circle, if you like. And if you get the culture right, that allows people to feel safe, that they matter and they belong. And those 3 things are critical to any engagement and motivation of a team. And I think as a leader, to create a healthy team culture, you need to do pretty much what it says on the slide, which is respect what was, acknowledge what is kind of reality where you are, engaging and getting excited about the future, get energized by that, and then make sure you're practicing equality, inclusion, and fairness. So we're going to go to our last poll or question now, if you like. And what I would say with this one, it's if you just use the chat function, actually, we haven't done a poll for this one, I don't think. Or did we do a poll for this one, Matt? I can't remember. Yes, we have. Sorry, we're going to do a poll first on this one. And if you think that we now know that culture and performance are highly interdependent, if you can just answer the question that's come up on the screen. So, do you feel your organizational culture has shifted in a positive way in the last 16 weeks? So, you know, you may feel it has, you may feel it hasn't, you may even be indifferent. But if you can just pop in, is this the chat function, Matt, or is it a poll?
It's chat, Katie.
Brilliant, it's chat. So if you could just pop in the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen, just next to the Q&A, if you could just pop in there whether you feel your organizational culture has shifted in a positive way in the last 16 weeks, it would be great to just get a feel for kind of where everyone feels they're at, really. Because as I said, there will undoubtedly be some great positives we can take from this, some silver linings, but I'm sure there will also be some people who feel perhaps they haven't. Great, I can see lots of yeses coming through, which is really encouraging to see. And you know what? I think we will continue to see this shift. I think as people come back, we re-onboard people. I think that's going to, you know, shift culture again. So I think it will be, you know, important to continue that. So I think the majority of what people have responded yes. And I would say it's super important that we maintain that. And the best way to maintain that is to really focus on the three main pillars of process, technology, and people. So we're going to ask you another question now. And again, if you can use the chat function, when it comes to your team culture, what is your focus right now? Is it process, technology, or people? And again, there's no right or wrong. And I'm sure it's a combination of both, of all three, because they all dovetail each other beautifully. But it, again, looks like a lot of people are coming through, which is really good to see. Technology, yeah. So as these are coming through, what we're just going to talk about now is really kind of how you can maintain and, I guess, maximize a healthy culture by focusing on process, technology, and people. And I think to remain competitive now and beyond, it's becoming clear that leaders need to be proactive. They need to be proactive, so those new unproductive behaviours that could potentially impact a healthy culture and the sustainability of the team are diluted. And we know from our own experiences at Robert Half, but also from our own research with the likes of Korn Ferry and McKinsey, that we know process, technology, and people are the three lenses that are probably the most effective to look through. And if we can address people's needs, if we can examine our structures and processes in place, and then leverage technology to its fullest capacity, that's when we're likely to maximize productivity and engagement overall. So I guess the questions I would get you to ask is, with process, what do you want to keep? What needs to be improved upon, adjusted? Where are there gaps? Technology, what tools, reports, platforms do we need to keep us truly agile? And with people, what is the experience for our current employees? What's it going to be like for those that are coming back? What is it going to be like for those that are still going to be on furlough? How do we stay connected? So perhaps asking yourself what you should start doing, what you should stop doing, and what you should do more of when it comes to process, technology, and people will definitely help you maintain if you have a more positive shift in culture. And if your answer was no, those are the things that will help you get closer to it. So to bring the webinar to a close, I just kind of want to finish on talking about togetherness, that collaboration, that connectiveness that we spoke about earlier and how important that was. And I think, leaders ultimately have had the test of their lives, and hopefully we won't get that again. But leadership effectiveness at the moment is not by consistently emphasizing one approach over the other. It's almost developing that ambidexterity to move between the two. We can't underestimate how difficult that is to do. It requires bucket loads of self-awareness, loads of practice, and contextual awareness. And I think we all know that over the last 16 weeks, our ability to collaborate, to leverage our key partnerships has been absolutely key in how we evolve our businesses. The old adage of a problem shared is a problem halved. And, we personally at Robert Half have learned loads from our customers and our clients, how they've navigated during these challenging times. And I guess for us, it's been a real privilege to be in recruitment, that we've got to see how so many companies, big or small, private or public, have coped with these unprecedented times. And I guess our request would be, if you find yourself stuck on a problem or a decision, please reach out to us. We would love to help. But more importantly, we can connect you with another client or perhaps a candidate or a customer that could give you some perspective, share their experiences and recommendations. So who maybe have dealt with a similar issue. I think the overall silver lining that we've seen in Robert Half is that key partnerships of everyone pulling together for a greater purpose has been absolutely our greatest silver lining, and we hope it has been for many of you too. So if anyone is stuck, as I said, please, it would be our pleasure to help you expand your network if we can, and help you find some resolutions to those. I don't know if everyone touching hands is an appropriate COVID slide. Every time I look at that, it makes me think, will we ever shake hands again? But with that, thank you so much for joining today. We wish you and your teams and loved ones well. And what we'll do now is we'll open up to some questions, if any have come through, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. So again, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Katie. So just before we wrap up, we've got one question coming through from Anthony. how can you help us with the best ways to help us with complacencies within teams working from home and those that are kind of, I suppose, have to be on site?
Do you want to answer that, Steve, or do you want me to do it?
Over to you, Katie, I think first, and then.
So how are we going to handle complacency of those working at home versus those that have to be in the office? Is that what you're asking?
I think so, yeah. And I mean, Anthony, feel free to free type in the chat box of the Q&A if I've got that sort of the tone of the question wrong.
So firstly, Anthony, I think we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room with this, in the sense of, people at home versus people in the office. And you're absolutely right, there is a divide. And, we're seeing, we're anticipating as we re-onboard people back in our own company, that there is going to be a divide between those that have worked during the last 16 weeks and those that have been furloughed for the last 16 weeks. And it doesn't matter which one you're on, you've all got a perspective on who's had it better or worse, let's say. And so the first thing I would say, I think it's just important to acknowledge that there's a difference and be okay with that. And then I think just openly talking about it and making each other aware of the pros and cons of working from home. Lots of people, if you've got children on school holidays now, there aren't the school clubs, etc., that you would normally have. Most people would love to be back in an office, have that connectedness, like I said. But equally, a lot of people that have to be in an office would love the flexibility in working from home. So my advice would be just absolutely talk about it, communicate about it. Don't avoid kind of that elephant in the room. So that would be my advice. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Steve.
Yeah, maybe, and it's not to disagree with Anthony's question, and I might be reading it wrong, but maybe assuming that people working from home are slightly more complacent than people working in the office might be a slightly old school approach to thinking about this way of working. When Katie and I presented on some pretty key stats around the future of work, there was some pretty clear evidence that would support Katie's thoughts around productivity actually increasing for some individuals working from home, where just that enablement to get the balance between, being dad, brother, friend, sportsman, gym enthusiast, from a wellness perspective, all that stuff has actually helped with people performing better in their actual job. So maybe assuming complacency, maybe you might need to think about that in a more positive mindset, Anthony.
And I think, Mary's just come through and made a really good point. I think a lot of people, that the boundaries of work and home have blurred, and a lot of people are actually working more, which obviously in itself is something you need to be mindful of, and make sure that if you have got people working from home that have a tendency to do that, their chances for burnout are so much higher. The mental fatigue has been, really tough for a lot of people. So, again, everything is about balance. I don't think there's any right or wrong. It's just the fact that we need to just be open to both, and just make sure that you as a leader are supporting in the best possible way you can, whilst acknowledging the fact that you've got, your own and your team's weight on your shoulders as well.
And I think just the last thing to add to that, Katie, because it's interesting, because we were chatting about it just before we came live, is that there's a phrase being coined within our own business, is that it's not working from home anymore, it's performing from home. So I suppose if you can be trusted to get whatever your job is done, then whether you do it from home, in the office, or a hybrid mix of either, it makes no odds really, I think, in the future.
Absolutely. So I think that's it with our questions.
Brilliant. Well, just leads me to say, Katie, again, just to reiterate what I said at the opening, is that it's been an absolute pleasure to bookend you on all of these webinars, to assist you on a couple of others as well. But I thought today, and hopefully people will believe me when I say this, is that I thought today was the best one yet, and a fantastic way to finish. It's the first time I've heard that material, and it's certainly the one which, as it makes you ask ask yourself a heck of a lot more questions. There'll be a lot more to reflect on and, you know, hold the mirror up to after this one, and lots more to do to perfect getting balance in all of those areas. I think the really interesting thing, my takeaway, I made three really key notes throughout that all related to culture and people. And it's very, very interesting. You said it, you know, I'm very much still on the tools in terms of helping candidates get their roles. And you're absolutely right when you say candidates are still more so than ever want to know what the culture of the business is going to be like in this new way of working. And very, very positive to see how many people have genuinely experienced the culture of their business improving and see it in a more positive way over the last 16 weeks. So I thought that was very, very interesting. But having helped you on the Future of Work webinar, which was one of the 16, Katie, I know how much effort goes into pulling the content together. So on behalf of myself, the Robert Half business, and everyone that's tuned in today and over the other webinars, just want to say a massive, massive thank you to you, and it's been a pleasure. Yeah, we will be back. Like I said, now's the time to change, adapt, and pivot, and look at other levers within our business that need to be pulled to get us to where we're going. But we will be back. But thank you again, Katie, and thank you to everyone that's tuned in over the last 16 weeks. It's been brilliant.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Matt. It's been, like I said, I think we'll miss our webinar Wednesdays moving forward. And thanks again to everyone who joined. So have a great rest of the afternoon. It looks like the sun's still shining. So have a great afternoon.
Brilliant. Thank you all. Cheers.